Lonely Cowboy won 5 Chinese girls in a poker game, but treated them like no one else with the win came first, howling down from the Badlands like a ghost that never learned how to rest. Then came the rider, Jack Callahan. He rode with his hat pulled low and his coat turned up, one boot and the stirrup torn, the other covered in dust that had traveled farther than most men dared. His horse was lean, ribs showing but steady. Together, they looked like two creatures that had outlasted too much and expected no kindness from what was left of the world. The year was 1872, and Dead Man's Bluff wasn't much of a town, just a crooked row of buildings clinging to the Wyoming frontier like splinters under heaven's fingernail. A saloon, a jail, a trading post that doubled as a church on Sundays, though no one remembered when the last sermon was given. Jack rode in slow, eyes hollow, coat faded from army gray to colorless memory. He'd been a soldier once, then a drifter, then something less than both. He dismounted outside the Silver A Saloon, the door creaking on its hinges like it too was tired of the sound of gunfire and lies. Inside, the air was thick, smoke from cigars, cheap whiskey, the smell of sweat and loss. The piano player hit wrong notes with the confidence of a man who'd been shot at for less. Jack stepped in. Heads turned, not in welcome, but in calculation. The kind of look men give a stranger when they're weighing what he's worth dead versus alive. The bartender, a big man with a scar over his cheek, grunted. "Ain't seen you round here before." Jack took off his hat. "Ain't seen myself in a while either," he said. His voice was sandpaper, slow, rough but honest. He ordered whiskey. Cheap, no ice. He drank it like it owed him something. Then his eyes found the table in the back, the one everyone pretended not to notice. 5 men sat there, cards flashing under the lamplight. Laughter came from them, the cruel kind that has no warmth behind it. And at the center of it all, like a spider wrapped in fine silk, sat Colonel Briggs, a man with a gold tooth and eyes too blue for a soul that black. Once a Confederate officer, now a dealer in what Everest and the frontier could sell. His coat was clean, his boots polished, and his holster loaded with more than just bullets. Jack watched. Then he walked over. "Buy-in's 50, Briggs said without looking up. Jack dropped his last 50 on the table. "I'll play." A hush moved through the saloon. The stranger had joined Briggs' table. That usually ended one of 2 ways, dead broke or dead. Briggs finally looked up, his smile thin and sharp. "You sure, mister? Table's hot tonight." Jack's answer was simple. "So am I." The first hand went easy. Jack played quiet, folded more than he called. He studied faces. The nervous twitch of the banker's eye. The rancher's tell, tapping his thumb when bluffing. Briggs was different. Smooth, patient, dangerous. They played for hours. Whiskey disappeared, replaced by sweat and tension. Coins clinked. The air thickened. Then came the final hand. Briggs leaned back. "Tell you what, Cowboy, let's make this one interesting." He reached into his coat and pulled out a folded piece of paper. A deed of sale. 5 head of stock? Jack asked. Briggs smirked. 5 heads, all right, but not cattle. The laughter around the table was ugly. From the shadows behind the saloon, a door opened, and 5 figures stepped into the lamplight. 5 young Chinese girls, wrapped in torn cotton and fear. Barefoot, dirty, eyes wide with exhaustion. The youngest couldn't be older than 8. Gasps rippled through the room. "Bought him off a railroad foreman down south," Briggs said, flipping his cards. "Good help. Better entertainment. Property of the colonel now, unless you think you can win him." Jack's jaw tightened. His hand went to his whiskey, then stopped. "They people," he said. Briggs laughed. "Out here, everything's property, son. Horses, land, souls. Ain't you learned that yet?" The room went still. Jack looked down at his cards. His heart pounded like a hammer inside a hollow chest. The girl stood motionless, not understanding the words, only the eyes that looked at them like numbers on a ledger. He thought of another girl, his sister Mary, back in Tennessee. 13 when the cholera took her. Her eyes had been the same, frightened, pleading, and full of questions the world never answered. He looked up. "Deal." The final game began. Cards slapped the table, one by one. The room's noise faded into a heartbeat rhythm, slow, tense, fateful. The dealer wiped sweat from his neck. 5-card draw. Jack took his cards, expression unreadable. His fingers didn't shake. They never did when it mattered. Briggs smiled, showing gold. Let's see what kind of luck the wind brought you, stranger. Jack bet everything, his coins, his saddle, his rifle, even his horse outside. Briggs' eyes gleamed. Brave. Or stupid. Either way, I'll take it. The last round came. Jack drew 2 cards. Briggs drew 1. The whole table leaned forward. Briggs laid down his hand. Full house. Kings over tens. The room erupted in approval. Jack said nothing. He placed his hand slowly on the table. Straight flush. He didn't even smile. Just stared at Briggs. The room went dead silent. Then Briggs' laughter filled it, cruel and booming. Well, I'll be damned. The devil himself must be dealing tonight. He shoved the deed across the table. Guess they're yours, cowboy. The laughter died when Jack didn't move to collect. He stood, holstered his Colt, and said quietly, untie them. Briggs' smile faltered. What was that? I said untie them. They ain't yours anymore. The saloon froze. Even the piano stopped. Briggs' hand slid toward his revolver. You best watch your tongue, son. Jack's eyes hardened. Ain't no man a son to a slaver. The words hit like a gunshot. Briggs drew. Jack was faster. Bang. The sound tore through the saloon, glass shattering, women screaming. Briggs' gun flew from his hand, blood streaking his sleeve. 2 of his men went for their rifles. Jack dropped them before they got the barrels up. Smoke filled the air. Chaos. The girls screamed and ducked under the table as bullets thudded into wood. Jack rolled behind a pillar, reloaded fast, fired again, clean, precise, without hesitation. When the smoke cleared, 3 men were dead, 2 wounded, and the rest gone. Briggs lay on the floor, clutching his arm, snarling like an animal cornered by its own greed. Jack stepped forward, his shadow long across the sawdust. You ever come after them, I'll finish what I started. He took the deed, tore it in half, and threw it into the fire. Briggs spat blood. You can't save M. Callahan. World'll eat him alive, same as it's eaten you. Jack didn't answer. He just turned, walked to the girls, and offered his hand. They didn't understand the words he spoke, but they understood the tone. Come on, he said softly. Time to go. They rode out under the cold moonlight, a ragged wagon creaking behind his horse. The prairie stretched endless, silver with frost. The girls sat silent in the back, wrapped in blankets he'd taken from the saloon. None of them spoke English except one. Limay, about 18, her face streaked with dirt, but her eyes alive. You not sell? She asked quietly. Jack shook his head. No. Why? He didn't answer for a long while. The hose beat a steady rhythm in the dark. Finally, he said, because somebody's got to stop the bleeding. She didn't understand the words fully, but she heard the ache in them. They rode through the night. Coyotes cried in the distance, and the stars looked down cold and indifferent. By dawn, the outline of Dead Man's Bluff was gone behind them, swallowed by the rising sun. They stopped near a dry creek bed. Jack built a small fire, hands steady though his heart felt like cracked stone. The girl sat close, huddled, whispering a language he didn't know. He opened a tin of beans, split it 6 ways, and handed it around. The youngest, Lien, was trembling so hard she spilled hers. Jack smiled softly, crouched down, and scooped it back into her cup. Easy now. You'll get more. She looked up, tiny, fragile, and for the first time since the saloon, she smiled back. Something inside him shifted. A place long frozen began to thaw. Limay watched him. You good man, she said hesitantly. He gave a dry laugh. You don't know me well enough to say that. Maybe, but you know bad. Jack stared into the fire. Sparks drifted upward, vanishing into the stars. He thought of the war again, of fields red with blood, of faces that never left his dreams. He'd carried guilt heavier than any saddle. Maybe this was how he'd start to put it down. He poured the last of his whiskey into the dirt. The smell burned. For the first time in weeks, the narrator's voice murmurs in reflection. He didn't drink himself to sleep. He kept watch instead, because someone finally needed him. The fire crackled low. The girls slept, curled under blankets like fallen birds. Jack sat by the flames, rifle across his knees, eyes on the horizon. In the east, the sky began to pale. He didn't know where the road would lead, only that turning back wasn't an option anymore. When the first light touched the plains, he whispered to the dawn, 5 souls. That's what I won tonight. Not gold, not luck. 5 souls. The wind carried his words away, but in his chest, something steady began to beat again. A man who'd lost everything now had something worth dying for. And by the time the sun rose, Dead Man's Bluff was already sending riders after him. The sky had turned the color of ash by the time they reached the foothills. A storm was coming, the kind that buried the world, and didn't bother to leave markers for the lost. Jack Callahan knew the look of that sky. He'd seen it before, over battlefields, over burned farms, over men who thought they still had tomorrows left. He tightened the reins. "We make camp by sundown," he said. Lee May, sitting beside him on the wagon bench, tilted her head, half understanding. She'd learned enough English to catch pieces. Camp, food, danger, but not the weight of the words that lived between them, behind them. The 4 other girls huddled under blankets, faces half hidden from the cold. The youngest, Lien, was coughing again. Dry, shallow. Jack's jaw tightened. They'd been on the run for 3 days. The tracks behind them were a trail of ghosts. Every few miles, Jack would stop, dismount, and kick dirt over their wagon ruts, just enough to confuse anyone following. But he knew it was only a matter of time before Colonel Briggs' men picked up the scent again. He didn't tell the girls that. They'd already seen enough fear. The campfire and the cold. By nightfall, they'd found a hollow between 2 ridges, a place where the wind passed over instead of through. Jack gathered what dry wood he could and built a small fire. The air burned their lungs when they breathed. Lee May tried to start the fire herself, her hands trembling, lips blue. Jack watched her fumble with the flint, then quietly took it from her and struck it once. A flame leapt to life. "See," he said, voice low but gentle. "Always cup the wind's mouth before you light the match." She looked at him, eyes shining in the firelight. "Wind has mouth." Jack smiled faintly. "Everything does out here." The girls pressed close to the fire. Lien leaned against Lee May's arm, shivering. Jack pulled his coat off and draped it over the child. She tried to refuse, but he just shook his head. "Keep it. I've known colder." He took first watch, sitting a few feet away, rifle across his knees. The fire crackled softly, and above them the stars looked sharp enough to cut. He could hear the girls whispering in their own tongue, soft, melodic, full of music even when broken by fear. It reminded him of lullabies his mother used to hum back in Tennessee. Lee May glanced at him again, hesitant. "You no sleep?" she asked. "Not yet," he said. "Why?" "Someone's got to keep the wolf away." She thought for a moment. "You are wolf." Jack raised an eyebrow. "That's so." She nodded, smiling faintly. "But good wolf." Jack chuckled, quiet and sad. Ain't heard that one before. He didn't know what time he drifted off, only that when he woke, dawn was gray and hollow, and snow had begun to fall. On the run, the snow didn't stop for 3 days. It fell in thick, endless waves, smothering the land in silence. The wagon's wheels froze, the horses grew sluggish, and Jack's breath came in white clouds. Each morning, he'd check behind them, always expecting riders on the horizon. Each night, the fire burned lower, the food stretched thinner. Lee May learned fast. She gathered wood, mended the girls' torn clothes, and even tried to hunt, though the sound of the rifle made her flinch. Jack watched her, without saying much. But inside, something was changing. He saw how she comforted the others, how she shared her own food when Lien was too weak to eat. He saw strength. They crossed a half-frozen river on the 5th day, water seeping into Jack's boots, turning his toes numb. On the other side, the land opened up, a white plain scattered with pine and shadow. They rested there for the night. Lee May brought him a cup of melted snow in a tin mug. You help us, she said softly. Why? Jack didn't answer right away. He looked into the fire instead. Because I once needed help, he said finally, and no one came. The ambush. It happened the next morning. They were breaking camp when May froze mid-step, her face pale. She had heard something. Hooves. Faint but fast. Jack heard it too. He swore under his breath. Get down. The girls ducked behind the wagon. Jack swung the rifle up, scanning the ridge. Then came the shout, hoarse, cruel, and familiar. Callahan! 3 riders broke over the rise, coats whipping in the wind, rifles gleaming under the gray sun. Briggs' men. The world narrowed to sound and instinct. Stay down! Jack yelled, firing once. Clean shot. The lead rider fell, horse screaming as it skidded on ice. The others fired back, bullets cracking against the wagon boards. Splinters flew. One girl screamed. Jack rolled, reloaded, fired again, missed. A bullet tore through his sleeve, grazing skin. Pain burned hot and sharp. May, take them to the river. She hesitated. What about you? Go. The girl scrambled toward a half-frozen river, just as one of Briggs' men looped wide, circling to cut them off. Jack saw him aim low toward the wagon. He didn't think. He ran. The shot came as he hit the ice. Too late. The wagon will exploded, splintering wood and sending the whole thing sliding into the river. The girls screamed as freezing water swallowed them. Jack dove after them. The cold hit like a hammer. He grabbed May first, dragged her toward shore, coughing, eyes wide. Then Lien, who clung to his coat like a lifeline. The others were already climbing out, shivering, terrified. Jack turned. One of the riders was reloading. He fired before the man could aim again. The bullet struck true. The man dropped. The last rider wheeled away, retreating. He'd return with more. Jack knew it. Up the hill, he gasped, voice hoarse. Move. The cabin in the snow. They found the cabin by accident. A collapsed old trapper shack half buried in snow, smoke-blackened walls and a broken roof. To the girls, it looked like salvation. To Jack, it looked like a place to die. He kicked the door open, ushered them inside, and dropped to his knees, shivering uncontrollably. His fingers were blue. May saw it. She knelt beside him, pulled off his soaked coat, and began rubbing his hands furiously with cloth. You cold, she said. He grinned weakly, just thinking about summer. She didn't smile. She wrapped him in an old fur blanket she found on the floor. No, die, she whispered fiercely. No, die. Jack's eyelids fluttered. Don't plan to. They built a small fire. Steam rose from their clothes as they hung them near the flames. The heat stung, but was life. That night, Jack drifted in and out of fevered dreams. Faces of dead marching past him. War. Fire. Briggs' sneer. His sister's voice. Then, through the haze, he felt a hand on his forehead. Small, gentle, steady. May. He opened his eyes. She was humming, a song soft as falling snow. A lullaby, maybe, or a prayer. He whispered, That song, what's it mean? She paused. Old song. Mean, safe now. Jack smiled faintly before sleep took him again. Kindness and firelight. 2 days passed before he could walk again. In that time, May kept the fire burning, hunted with a snare line, and fed everyone with what little she found. When he woke fully, he saw the girls asleep in a pile of blankets, and May sitting near the doorway, rifle across her knees, just as he had done. You learn quick, he murmured. She looked back at him, chin lifted with quiet pride. You teach. I listen. He sat up, grimacing. That shot back there, the one you fired, saved us all. She hesitated, scared. Good, he said. Means you're still human. For a long moment, neither spoke. The wind outside moaned against the walls. Then she said softly, Before, I think you bad man. Jack chuckled. You weren't wrong. But now not same. She looked at him, eyes searching. You fight for us. Why? He looked at the fire, the light flickering against his scarred hands. Because I'd done enough fighting against the wrong people. Time to switch sides. She didn't understand every word, but she felt the meaning. She nodded once. You heart good, just broken. That silence between them said more than words could. He smiled a little. Maybe the wolves. The third night brought more than wind. The howls started after midnight, low, distant, rising in number. The girls stirred in their sleep. Lee May reached for the rifle. Jack was already up, eyes alert. Wolves, he said. They smelled the blood from the horses. Horse dead. He nodded grimly. Yeah, they'll be here soon. He checked the rifle, loaded it, handed Lee May the revolver. You remember what I showed you? She nodded, jaw tight. The door rattled once. Then came the growl, deep and close. Jack stepped outside, snow biting into his boots. The world was white and still except for the moving shadows. 3 wolves circling the cabin, eyes like cold fire. He raised a rifle. Bang. One down. Another darted in from the side. Jack turned, too slow. The wolf leapt, jaws snapping onto his arm. He slammed his elbow into its skull, shoved it off, fired again. Missed. Then another shot cracked behind him. Lee May's. The wolf yelped, fell still. Jack turned, surprised. She stood in the doorway, both hands on the revolver, breathing hard. Her eyes met his. He grinned through the blood on his sleeve. Good shot. By dawn, the snow around the cabin was red in patches. The girls were safe. The wolves were gone. Jack sat by the fire, arm bandaged. Lee May cleaned the rifle, hand steady. He looked at her, not as a burden now, but as something else entirely. Thank you, he said quietly. She shook her head. You thank me. I thank you. Same. He stared into the flames. You ever wonder if there's a place in this world for people like us? She thought for a while. If no place, she said, then we make one. Jack smiled faintly. Guess that's what we're doing. That night, the wind died. The world outside was still, heavy with new snow. Inside, warmth breathed between them like something sacred. The girls slept, safe. Lee May sat beside him, close enough to feel the slow rhythm of his heartbeat. Neither spoke. There was no need. The silence was its own language now. Outside, the first light of morning began to paint the snow gold. Jack whispered to himself, still alive, still fighting. Lee May glanced at him. What you say? He smiled. I said the wolves didn't win. She nodded, leaning her head lightly against his shoulder. And for the first time in years, Jack Callahan didn't feel alone. The snow had melted to slush by the time Jack rode into Red Hollow. The land was gray and raw, like an open wound. Pines swayed against a low sky, their needles whispering secrets of men long gone. A crow perched on the wooden cross over the graveyard outside town, watching him pass, black eyes glinting, silent. Jack's hat brim dripped meltwater. His coat was torn at the shoulder where the bullet had grazed him 2 nights back. Lee May's scarf was tied around his arm, crimson and soft, a reminder of gentler hands, of why he'd come this far. Behind him, the wagon creaked, its wheels chewing through mud. Inside, the 4 girls huddled under blankets. They'd seen death on the trail, frostbite, gunfire, hunger. But they'd also seen something they hadn't before, a man who stayed. Lee May sat at the front, reins in hand. Her hair fluttered like black silk in the cold breeze. When she looked at him, there was no fear anymore, just quiet resolve. You sure you want to do this? She asked softly. Jack kept his eyes on the distant lights of the town, the saloon lamps glowing through the storm like fireflies. Ain't much choice left, darling. Briggs took everything from me once. Not again. She nodded. Then we end it. Red Hollow wasn't much. A crooked line of buildings half buried in snow, a saloon, a blacksmith, a church that hadn't heard prayer in years. But tonight, the saloon was alive, the rusty spur warm with whiskey and bloodlust. Laughter and fiddles spilled into the street. Inside, Briggs held court. He was bigger now, fatter, meaner, wearing a black fur coat lined with gold trim. His hands, thick as shovels, rested on the poker table. Beside him, his new gang lounged. 8 men with guns, the kind who'd shoot a man for blinking wrong. The dealer's hands trembled as he shuffled cards. Briggs grinned. "Don't look so nervous, kid. Ain't like I ever killed anyone for losing." Laughter, the kind that curdled the air. Then the doors creaked. Cold wind swept through the room. The fiddle stopped mid-note. Heads turned. Jack Hollis stepped through the threshold, boots heavy, snow dripping from his coat, his eyes cold iron. "Evening, boys," he said. Briggs froze mid-smile. "Well, I'll be damned. Thought the crows picked you clean by now." Jack's hand hovered near his revolver. They tried. The silence stretched. The fire popped. Someone coughed and regretted it. Briggs leaned back, grinning. "You got some nerve walking in here. Cowboy, after what happened at Dead Man's Bluff, I figured you'd learned your place." Jack took a slow step forward. "My place? You mean under your boot, watching you sell people like cattle?" Briggs chuckled. "They were winnings, Jack. You of all men should know the rules." Jack's voice hardened. Rules changed. Behind him, Lee May entered quietly. The girls waited outside. Her steps were light, but her gaze never left Briggs. Briggs smirked when he saw her. "Ah, the little prize herself. You train her yet, Cowboy? Or still trying to turn her into a wife?" Jack's gun flashed before the word wife finished leaving Briggs's mouth. The bullet struck the whiskey bottle beside him, shattering glass across the table. The room erupted. Chairs scraping, boots stomping, hands going for guns. But Jack was faster. Always had been. "Don't," he warned, revolver steady. "Not unless you want to get spilling across this fine floor." Briggs raised a hand, smiling crookedly. "Boys, easy now. Man's got something to say." Jack moved closer. The lantern light carved deep shadows across his face. "You sold those girls to men who'd use them and kill them. You took everything from folks who had nothing. You think that makes you powerful." Briggs shrugged. "Makes me alive. That's all that counts out here." Jack shook his head slowly. "No, not anymore." The fire crackled between them. 2 men who'd once shared whiskey and blood, now standing on opposite sides of everything. Briggs smirked. "You come here for revenge or redemption?" Jack's eyes flicked to Lee May. "Both." Then came the sound of hammers cocking. From a balcony above, 3 of Briggs's men aimed rifles. Another kicked the back door open, stepping in with a shotgun. Briggs laughed. "Ain't you learned, Jack? You can't beat a stack deck." Jack exhaled slowly. Snowflakes still clung to his coat. "Maybe not, but I don't play your game anymore." He dropped low, rolled behind the table, and fired. The first man on the balcony spun, blood misting the lamplight. Gunfire roared like thunder. Bottles shattered. Men yelled. Lee May ducked behind the bar, grabbing a pistol from a fallen hand. "Jack!" she shouted. He moved like lightning, sliding across the floor, his revolver spitting fire. A second outlaw fell, then a third, but the shotgun man fired. The blast tore through the air, grazing Jack's side. He grunted, hit the floor, clutching his ribs. Lee May aimed, hand shaking. She squeezed the trigger. One shot, clean. The shotgun man collapsed. For a heartbeat, silence. Only the hiss of snow through the open door. Then Briggs rose, pulling his pistol. "You should have stayed dead." Jack, blood on his sleeve, smiled faintly. "Guess I'm bad at following orders." They fired at the same time. Briggs's bullet tore through Jack's shoulder. Jack's round hit Briggs in the gut, deep and ugly. Briggs staggered back, knocking over a chair. He looked down, shock and fury fighting for space on his face. You worthless." Jack stepped forward, chest heaving. "That's for every woman you sold. Every man you buried." Briggs tried to raise his gun again, but Jack's second shot ended it. The saloon went still. The smell of gunpowder and blood thickened the air. Lee May stood, her pistol trembling. The fire flickered against her face, tears streaking the dust and ash. Jack swayed but stayed on his feet. He holstered his gun slowly. "It's done," he said, voice hollow. Lee May crossed the room and caught him as his knees buckled. Outside, The wind howled over Red Hollow. They buried Briggs on a ridge above town. No prayers, no markers, just snow and silence. The girls watched from the wagon, wrapped in blankets. Lee May stood beside Jack. "You could have walked away," she said. Jack stared at the mound of earth. Could have, but then he'd still be out there. And men like him don't stop unless someone makes M. Lee May's voice softened. "You did." He turned to her then. The first real look since the shooting stopped. "And now what?" She smiled faintly. "Now maybe we live." The following days were quiet. They stayed in Red Hollow, what was left of it. The townsfolk, too afraid to fight Briggs before, now came forward. They helped the girls, offered food, blankets, new names. Lee May cooked by the fire outside the saloon ruins. Jack sat nearby, arm bandaged, watching the flames dance. "You're not staying," she said, reading the silence. He sighed. "Was never much good at settling. The land don't take kindly to ghosts like me." She didn't argue. She just stirred the pot, her hand steady. After a while, he said, "You could start over. Somewhere safe. Maybe California. Heard they treat folks kinder there." Lee May looked into the fire. "Home isn't where you're safe. It's where someone waits for you." Jack blinked, caught off guard. Then she reached into her pocket and pulled out his lucky coin, the one he'd lost the night he won them. "I think," she said softly, "this belongs to you now." He took it, turning it between his fingers. It gleamed in the firelight, old, scarred, but still shining. "Guess luck finally came back around," he murmured. Days turned to weeks. When spring touched the mountains, the girls laughed again. The youngest learned English words: sun, horse, home. Lee May's laughter joined theirs sometimes. Jack helped rebuild the church roof. Hammered nails with one arm, grumbling and smiling despite himself. One morning, he saddled his horse. The world was green again, or trying to be. Lee May approached quietly. "Leaving?" He nodded. "Ain't much else I can do here. You've all got a life now. I just get in the way." She stepped closer, wind lifting her hair. "Then go where your heart isn't empty." He smiled, tired and tender. "You make it sound easy." "It's not," she whispered. "But maybe that's what makes it worth it." He looked at her then, really looked. The scars of hardship were still there, but so was light, strength. He touched his hat. "Take care of him, Lee May." She caught his hand before he turned. "And who'll take care of you, cowboy?" He didn't answer, just looked toward the horizon, the long, red road fading into sunrise. Then quietly he said, "Maybe one day I'll find a place that feels like home." She smiled through tears. "Maybe you already did." As Jack rode out of Red Hollow, the wind carried the faint sound of laughter. The girls, chasing each other through the meadow. Lee May calling after them. He smiled to himself. For the first time in years, his heart didn't feel hollow. The frontier stretched before him, endless, brutal, beautiful. His reflection lingered in the pool of melted snow beside the trail. He barely recognized a man staring back. Not the drifter, not the gambler, not the ghost. Just a man who finally learned what mercy looks like. He tipped his hat to the rising sun. "So, what do we take from this tale?" His voice seemed to whisper in the wind. "Maybe it's this. A man don't find redemption by winning. He earns it by what he's willing to lose." He rode on, the horizon blazing gold.